In its original form, that is probably where the parable of the shrewd steward ended, with this line. And the master commended that dishonest steward for acting prudently. Done.
He gave his stuff.
Yeah, he gave his stuff. He gave money. He canceled huge amounts of the debt that was owed to him, the master. And his master said, "Good job." But in the Gospel of Luke Begonia, 4 endings have been attached to it. All later editions, none on the lips of the pre-Paschal Jesus when he actually told an earlier version of this story. It's not difficult at all to discover where these later added endings came from. When preachers give sermons, folks, on the parables, they always add in their punchline, which to them explicitly states the point of Jesus' story. We've seen in the last several presentations that concluding punchlines got added onto the parables of Jesus by preachers using the stories over a variety of different times and places. These people did not all use the same punchline for the same story, did they? This is just like preachers today. It seems that Luke, or whoever he was, collected punchlines. It's doubtful that he created any of the 4 he attached to this parable. Almost certainly he had heard these punchlines from others who had preached before on this parable. That gives us a good inclination that this parable does go back to the time of Jesus. Why would he invent, if Luke invented this parable, why would he invent such a difficult, bizarre story? The more bizarre, chances are it goes back to Jesus, right? Yeah, by criterion of embarrassment. Causes a problem. Why would you want to hamstring yourself? Wouldn't you want to make it simple? Like, for instance, would you invent, if you were inventing the story of Jesus, would you invent that he was from a low-life place like Nazareth? Oh, you'd make him from Jerusalem, right? An elite. Why would you make him a construction worker, low-life son? Would you invent that his mother was pregnant early? Would you invent that? No, that's shameful. Why would you invent that? And if you believed he was cosmic Lord and Messiah, would you invent that he was hung on a cross and died shamefully naked on a cross? Would you invent that? No, that's like hamstringing before you run a lap. Well, let me just cut my hamstrings with a big butcher knife. You understand what I'm saying? This is called the criterion of embarrassment. You wouldn't invent that. Would you invent that women found the tomb empty and were the first ones to see Jesus? Would you invent that? No, you would be embarrassing for you. You would have to admit that. Because that's what happened, right? Yeah. Various folk come up with various punchlines for the story. Luke knew of 4, all a little bit on the bizarre side. Bizarre punchlines for a bizarre parable. Luke didn't understand Jesus' parable, folks. He didn't know what to do. So he just added them all. That's what you do. All right? Here's the first punchline Luke added. Luke chapter 16, verse 8b. For the children of this world are more prudent in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. Does that do anything for you folks? It basically says that other folks are smarter than you dumbasses. Children of light. You feel good with that? Is that good news to you? You know, something like that. That doesn't work too well, does it? Okay. Scratch that one. Let's try another. We got 3 more to go. Maybe one of those will work. Gives us a second punchline. Verse 9. I tell you, make friends for yourselves with dishonest wealth, so that when it fails, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Huh? That's worse than the first. As far as punchlines go, no matter how Luke felt about it, this one's a loser. So let's scratch that one too. All right, we got two more. Luke attaches a third, rather complex punchline. Maybe if you put a lot of words into it, it'll like, oh yeah, sure, that sounds mystical to me. That works. Luke chapter 16, verses 10 to 12. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters is also trustworthy in great ones. And the person who is dishonest, it's kind of like the first and the last should be first. Oh yeah, that's right, it makes sense. Oh, wait a minute, it doesn't make sense. Okay. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters and is also trustworthy in great ones. And the person who is dishonest in very small matters is also dishonest in great ones. Okay, magnitude. If, therefore, you are not trustworthy with dishonest wealth, who will trust you with true wealth? If you are not trustworthy with what belongs to another, who will give you what is yours? The first sentence may be a truism, but it has little to do with the story and makes no sense whatsoever as a concluding remark. The two questions at the end about not being trustworthy are a little bit of folk wisdom, but that has nothing to do with the story. Let's scratch that one. Finally, Luke gives us one more punchline. Verse 13. And this is usually the one that homilists go to. When they give this story, this is the one they go, this is the one, because it's at the end. So that's the one we'll go with. No servant can serve two masters. He will either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve God and money. Those are good ideas, especially to people sensitive to the perspective of the limited good. But this too is not what the parable is about. The net result is that Luke, in having collected the various punchlines he had heard given to this parable, when it had been preached and taught, added them all. And we are no better off than when we started, are we? Because all of these added concluding punchlines are confusing at best. The fact that Luke added 4 concluding punchlines suggests that he wasn't confident about any one of them. This is a great lesson about inspiration. Inspiration can't mean dictation. Which one is it, God? Dictate it to me. Inspiration doesn't get rid of the human limitations of the author. Inspiration happens in the mess. And the Bible isn't an answer book. Homer Simpson's right. Because these 4 interpretations of the story are not going to work, we got to start over.